What's your language?
Welcome back to the Way to Native Chronicles. What we have for you today is a redo of an earlier video, because I'm sort of a perfectionist. It's a video on how to make your own reloading table, one that's freestanding and portable. Now, at first I wasn't too sure how much attention this would get and if people would find it useful, but over time I've been finding that some people have been building this table, and I really feel obliged to make a better video of it, take a little time to go over the various aspects of it and make the presentation clearer. So I hope you enjoy this video. It's a bench that I've made about 35 years ago, and really I just kind of made it on the fly. I was living in a place where I might not be able to stay in that one location, and kind of not always free to build a bench against a wall and attach it and things like that. So sometimes you need something that's portable, and really what happened with this bench is I built it as a portable unit, and lo and behold, I'm still using the same bench 35 years later. It's actually a very good design, and I think it's well worth sharing this with you. So let's just go over some of the aspects of this bench then to get things started. What I'm going to do in this video is I'm showing you here the bare bones version of the bench, and I'll show you in the top corner what the completed setup looks like, but we're starting off with the bare bones, and you can see that it's got a square tabletop. Everything on this is built out of 2x4s and 3/4 inch thick plywood. As you can see with the tabletop, there's actually 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood sitting on there. And the construction of it is very simple, and the rest of this video is going to show you page by page the steps in the order that you should do them, all the dimensions and everything for building this table. So it's actually a real cinch to put this thing together. But let's just kind of go over some of the aspects of it that are worth taking note of and explaining. To begin with, we have a little footrest on the lower left leg, and that footrest is intended to be something to support your back to reduce strain. Also, if you're on the upstroke on a reloading press, to pin the table down a little bit. It really is an important aspect of this design. When I'm reloading, as a rule, I have my little stool sitting a bit left of center on the bench, so that the handle of the press comes down along my right thigh. You have to be in that position to reload. So then I wind up putting my right foot on that little step. Now, just I should mention that, as you'll see further on in the video, the press is mounted on the right hand side of this table as it's shown. We'll see that later. Another aspect of this design is that diagonal piece, 2x4, comes down, and the broad feet that it has, that increases the rigidity and the balance of the whole table, because it is a fairly small compact table, but when you get those long legs under it, very securely fastened to the entire structure, you can exert tremendous force on your reloading press without anything giving or tipping or anything close to that. This unit is exceptionally strong, and it stays strong. Like, I've built it 35 years ago and haven't had to do a thing to it. Yeah, another aspect of this is things that I've added over the years as I found them useful. One of those things is this little ledge that I can put my reloading scale on. Because if you're like me, you're using a powder measure, and when you're using a powder measure to dispense the powder for your cartridges, you usually got your loading blocks on one side of the press and then another loading block on the other, and you're moving stuff from left to right, and you're filling up the cartridges with powder. And when you're calibrating your press, you're measuring to check that you have it right to begin with, and then as you're going along dispensing powder, you're checking it every 10th case, something like that, to make sure that the powder measure isn't going out of whack on you. So it's really nice to be able to take your scale, and I'm talking about a beam scale here, and place it on that ledge that you see here. It's raised so that it's at about eye level, which really helps if you're sitting on the stool on the right hand side there and you dump some powder into the little weighing pan and you put it on the scale. You're looking right at the 0 mark there to see where the balance beam is pointing, instead of crouching down and bending over trying to see what things measure out to. So that actually is an important aspect of this design. One thing I would add to that is that with that elevated platform, what I do is I've drilled holes right around the perimeter of it, and those little pilots that you use for, like in your lubricizer and your trimming die, they need to be stored somewhere, so I put those in those little holes around the edge of that platform, and which is good for accessibility, but it's also very important in another respect. It keeps the scale from accidentally sliding off that platform, and believe me, it can happen, and it'll happen when you least expect it. So really good idea to put the little perimeter fence of some sort around that platform, just so you know. Okay, let's move on to the next thing, and that's what I'm calling a case platform. What I do is I have our CBS powder measure stand that goes right behind it, just to the left of it in this picture, and elevates the powder stand so that I can get cases under it. And what I find is it's very helpful for reducing fatigue if you can rest your hand on this little platform when you're holding a case underneath the powder measure. So just pop this little case platform in there and you'll be glad you did, trust me. And you can even make it to the exact height, which actually I did for fitting a 44 Magnum case in there. But even if you're doing rifle cartridges, you can still dispense the powder into a little bucket, little measuring spoon type of thing that your wife will let you steal from her. That's what I do anyways, and then I have my cartridges in the loading block on the left hand side, and I dispense a bit of powder in it. I've got the funnel sitting on the cartridge, and I just dump it into the cartridge and then move the funnel on to the next case and dispense powder again, so it can move through things very nicely. It's a low fatigue way. Every 10th measure, you dumping it onto the powder scale and checking it on your beam scale. So that's the reason for that. Now, next you can see we got the reloading press on there. Guess I should show that. There's not much to say about it except that this very thick tabletop with the 2 layers of 3/4 inch plywood, that's just excellent for holding a press because it's very rigid. Not too much overhang over the structure underneath it, but enough so that you have your clearance for the press to operate. So this is a pretty important aspect of the whole thing. You'll see later on in the plan views and other parts of this assembly where I recommend placing the reloading press. It's got to be a little bit off center, or at least that's what I find works best. And the mounting of the press to your tabletop, it's a good idea to cut yourself out a piece of steel plate if you can, and put that underneath, and then have the nuts, the bolts coming to the table, and then the nuts tightening right into that piece of sheet steel. Don't absolutely have to use big washers, and you'll probably be fine too. But I use big washers on top of the fact that I also use lock washers on it. Never ever have to retighten this press once it's down. Now for another aspect of this design is the placement of a melting furnace. Now this is going to seem like things are getting very crowded, and actually they are, but you know, it does work. So this is something you may or may not want to do, but I do have my melting furnace sitting on this table all the time. And one of the advantages of doing it this way is I have a little foot operated system that allows me to control the spigot of the melting furnace, if you see there. That's made out of just simply a half-inch piece of wood dowel. And I have that piece of wood dowel go right to the edge of the tabletop, and it goes down right to the floor level, and it normally just sits on the floor. You can cut wood dowels to length to suit. It's very simple to do. And that little portion there at the bottom where you can slip the toe of your shoe through there, very easy to make, because you can buy little PVC T's and connectors, elbows from the hardware store with no problem at all, and they just friction fit right onto that half-inch dowel. So it's so easy to make this. At the top there's a little slot that I cut in there, and then I drill a hole through it and fit that to I basically just take the little handle off the melting furnace that operates the spigot, take its bolt out and pass it through the hole in this piece of wood doweling, and retighten the handle on there, and everything's held together very nicely. So that's something that's caught some interest when it comes to this reloading table. Whether or not you make this exact reloading table, this is something that's well worth considering doing in some other contexts as well, because I've been casting this way with a foot operated spigot for decades now, and it's a very smooth way to go, because you can just keep your wooden stick, that mallet or whatever you use to break open the molds, in the one hand and your mold in the other, and you don't have to put things down, pick things up in order to operate the spigot. So there's a suggestion at least. In addition, on this table, just to wrap things up before we get into the step-by-step assembly phase, I'll just mention that I also have a lubicizer that goes on the left-hand side of this table, and that does provide me enough room for the lubicizer. In addition, I even have my trimmer mounted just to the left of the melting pot. So as you'll see further on in this video during the assembly, on the plan view of the table, I show you where I locate those things, and it works out quite well. So I think that covers the introduction to this building process, what the parts are for. Next thing we should do is we should get into step by step how to put this together. If you follow your construction plans in the order that I present them, this table is going to go together very easily. All the dimensions are provided for you, and no fancy tools are required. Okay, let's begin with taking a look at the plan view of this table. There's a lot of dimensions on this which you can refer to at a later point when you want to place items on top of the table, but for now the main takeaway is the total dimension of the tabletop, which is 24 by 24, and you'll want to cut 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood to that dimension so that they can be screwed together. And I'll just mention right now that since we're on the subject, that when you screw this tabletop into the lower structure, it's a good idea to countersink those screw heads, because you're going to be sliding case trays and such over top of this surface. So it's nice to keep everything without any bumps sticking out. Now we can move on to building 2 of the sides of this table. These are done just with 2x4s and 3/4 inch thick plywood. I just use wood screws to hold everything together, and even without the use of glue, this table has stayed rigid for, as I said, 35 years now. So get this done and we'll move on to the next step. Now we can move on to building the other 2 sides of the core, and we're just basically connecting them with 2x4s here. Take note of the fact that the 2x4s on the top are going to be longer. That's so they can complete the perimeter frame around the box. Now that we have the core built and held together, let's add in the perimeter boxing on the top of the core by adding 2 2x4s, and add the legs on, which screw on to the ends of those bottom 2x4s, and include the diagonal that connects the 2. Very simple construction. Now things get a little bit fun, because we're going to add in the closing pieces to the core. And what I've done is I've made doors on each side, and that opens up used to the cavity that's there, because I hate to have some wasted space. So I've added in handles and locking hardware. This is totally up to you how you want to do this. You could just close in the cavity with single pieces of plywood, but I went ahead and did it this way, having shelving on the right hand side with a backing wall, and on the left hand side a larger cavity where I could store gunpowder and things like that. So this is totally up to you how you want to do this, but in any case you're going to want to close off the ends of the core for this step. The next step now is to simply screw the tabletop onto the top of the frame. Very simple. And I would recommend, as I mentioned before, that when you screw it into the frame, you countersink those screws so that they're flush with the top of the table, because you're going to be sliding things around on it and you don't want them to hang up on bumps. And next, of course, there's that little footstep that I mentioned earlier in this video. This is really nice to have on there, very simple to put on, and reduces a lot of the back strain you might experience when you're putting in long sessions on the reloading table. Now we'll take a quick look at the layout of the equipment on the table from a side view, and I just want to draw to your attention the overhang of the press that you need in order to securely fasten it to the table. You're going to need a little extra overhang if you want to use a steel plate to go between the washers and the nuts on your bolts that hold the press on. So just keep that in mind if you want to do it that way. Now we have some dimensions for the various additions that I referred to earlier, the scale and the case platform, if you choose to add those to your tables as I've done. And now we're on to the last illustration of this video, and that is just showing a close-up of the attachment of the spigot handle to that piece of wooden dowel that you can use going down to the floor to control the spigot with your foot. Now, if you've made it through this far to the video, I'm assuming that you're seriously considering making a table like this, and if you are, I've had a few people already make this table, and they've given me feedback saying that they really found it useful. So go ahead and give it a shot yourself, but you know, it's a little difficult to do this just from watching a video. You can of course pause on these various steps in the process and write down the dimensions if you like, but of course an easier way to do this would be just to have a set of printed plans. Now all these drawings I've done in Inkscape, so they're all vector based and they can be scaled up as large as necessary, and that means I can print off a high quality set of plans actually if I wanted to. So if you're interested in having a set of printed plans, I've got an idea for you. I'm going to post my email address at the ending screen of this video, and just fire me off an email and we'll make arrangements for me to send you the plans. And as always, at the end of these videos, I like to remind you to click subscribe if you haven't already. If you appreciate this content and want to see more of it, the act of subscribing to the channel is what keeps this content coming. And it's something I enjoy doing, and I'd like to continue covering as many subjects as you find useful out there. We cover quite a wide variety, so don't be afraid to make suggestions to me, because there's a very good chance I'll make a video on the subject you request. So in conclusion, I'd like to wish you good health also during the difficult times this video is being made in, and from the Way to Native Chronicles, God bless.